France is at war, as we heard from the president there. And Secretary of State John Kerry has drawn some criticism for comments that he made about the attacks on Friday and also the Charlie Hebdo rampage that we watched unfold back in January. John Kerry suggesting that the assault on the satirical newspaper was in a way more understandable than the horror that unfolded last week. Here he is in his own words.
There's something different about what happened from Charlie Hebdo, and I think everybody would feel that. There was a sort of particularized focus and perhaps even a legitimacy in terms of, not a legitimacy, but a rationale that you could attach yourself to somehow and say, okay, they're really angry because of this or that. This Friday was absolutely indiscriminate. It wasn't to aggrieve one particular sense of wrong. It was to terrorize people. It was to attack everything that we do stand for.
Joining me now, presidential candidate, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Governor, welcome.
Hey, good to see you, Martha. He needs to get some sleep and shut up, is what he needs. That's disgraceful. For the Secretary of State of the United States to stand up and say that there's some rationale for what happened in January, these are the kind of weak, mixed signals that this administration sends that helps to really, make the American people think that there's no one watching the store, and there isn't. This is the same president who's sitting around saying that somehow it's everyone else's fault. He's the guy who drew the red line in Syria and didn't enforce it, didn't set up a no-fly zone, or these refugees wouldn't have to be leaving their own country.
You look back at that, and it's true. I mean, there's this outrage on the part of the president, and you really do feel his passion the most. Just watching, I don't think it's editorializing. I think you look at his speech, and the moments when he got the most engaged was when he talked about the fact that he thinks Republicans essentially think this is a war against Islam, and that's a big recruiting tool, and that you guys need to back down and let these Syrian refugees in because they're widows, they're orphans. And he said you wrote in your letter, that was directed at you.
Yeah, well, how about the fact that his own FBI director says they do not have the capacity to vet these people? That should be the end of the conversation, Martha. The American people need to be protected first. The homeland needs to be protected first. And this president had an opportunity to protect these people in Syria. And he didn't do it. He broke his word to them. Now nearly 250,000 of them are dead, and there's no safe place for them to go in Syria. That's why there should be a no-fly zone in Syria and a safe haven in Syria. And for this president to blame Republicans, this is what he and Hillary Clinton always do. You remember back to her debate 2 debates ago when she said one of the enemies she's most proud of are Republicans. This is why the city is so divided in Washington, D.C., and our country is divided, because they speak that way. We should be protecting the homeland first and foremost, and when the FBI director says we cannot effectively vet these people, that should be the end of the conversation about bringing Syrian refugees in here.
Yeah. I mean, this is Paris. This is not Tel Aviv. This is not, in Israel, they're used to living like this. This is a distinct effort on the part of this terrorist group to make everyone extremely uncomfortable across Western Europe and here at home, too. And yet the president keeps telling us that we don't have to worry as much here, that we're not at as big a threat. He says, of course, we have to be ready, but we're not at as big a threat as Europe is. Is that dangerous language from him?
Yes, and the president lives in a fantasy world. He lives in a fantasy world, Martha. He sees the world as he wishes it were, rather than the way it is. This is the same guy who Thursday said, that ISIS was contained. And then Friday we had the attacks in Paris. We've also had attacks in Lebanon. ISIS is not contained. ISIS is not a regional threat. ISIS is now a global threat. And we need to do things like not do what the president did and members of Congress to take away intelligence capability. Part of what happened in Paris is an intelligence failure, that these folks were plotting and planning, obviously, for some time in a very intricate plan, and we didn't pick it up. No one picked it up. And this is the president who took tools away from the NSA, has taken tools away from the CIA, and the CIA director said yesterday that ISIS has grown exponentially since Barack Obama's been president.
Look at the world big picture for a moment. I mean, we talk about this being the kind of threat we faced against fascism, the kind of threat we faced against communism, the fight of this generation. And in order to get the American people on board, you want to be president. You're one of many who are out there who want to be president, still 14 Republicans. If you were to look at the American people and say, here's why you need to come with me, and here's how I'm going to lead us, and here's why it's worth it, here's what's at stake, what would you say to them?
What I'd say to them is, first off, you want to be with me because I'm the only one on that stage who has experience fighting terrorism. I was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey right after 9/11, brought a number of major terrorism cases, know how to use the Patriot Act, know how to use the tools that we have to be able to do it. But here's the most important thing. Is this the world you want your children to live in? A world where you have a president who says that you shouldn't be too worried. A president who breaks his word and allows mayhem to exist around the world. We need a president who's going to be strong and unafraid to make decisions. And those decisions need to be the elimination of ISIS. Because if they aren't eliminated, they're coming for us. We know that. We lived this with Al-Qaeda. We have seen this movie before, and we saw the ending, and it wasn't pleasant. And I don't want to go through that again. I went to those funerals. I know those widows and orphans in the United States. The president talks about Syria. I know the widows and the orphans in the United States from 9/11. And I don't want to see another generation of those folks in our country. And if I'm president, it won't happen.
Governor, thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Good to see you. Let's go back to Bill in Paris. Bill?